So National Farmers Union was formed in 1902, and this is kind of what we stand for. Our vision is of a world in which farm families and their communities are respected, valued, and enjoy economic prosperity and social justice. And our mission is to advocate for family farmers and their communities through education, cooperation, and legislation. And I'll talk a little more about that as we move along through the program. Again, National Farmers Union was formed in Point, Texas, down in kind of that, I think it's fairly central part of Texas. Tom and I have both been there, and I'm sure Cheryl has. Maybe some of you have been to Point before, but that's where we got our start in September of 1902. It's the second largest general farm organization in the country. A general farm organization, or GFO, is just an organization composed of farmers regardless of production type or size. We have roughly 250,000 members across the country, and there are 22 organized divisions in about 33 states. I'll show you a map here of those organized divisions. You'll notice that there's a great swath of green all through the Great Plains and the Midwest, up into the Northeast, and even some out in the West. We've even got members in Alaska and Hawaii. We do not have organized chapters down in the Southeast. Also, that there are some states that are combined. So we have New England. There are 7 states that are combined there. Rocky Mountain Farmers Union is Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. And then the Northwest states are Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. So the Farmers Union principles, I mentioned earlier, education, legislation, and cooperation, but we really represent those farmer members who are engaged in diverse farming and ranching pursuits. And by doing so, it's through those 3 principles. Cooperation, working together in a cooperative way, really lifting up the cooperative business model. Education, of course, is important, educating our youth, educating our members, educating the public. And then also legislation. So like what we'll be talking about here tonight with the Farm Bill, but also legislation on the state level as well. At Kansas Farmers Union, it's our work to protect and enhance the economic interest and quality of life for family farmers, ranchers, and communities. We believe that family ownership of farmland is the basis for the world's most viable system of food and fiber production. And we believe that maintaining this family farm system will preserve our natural and human resources, as well as promote a strong rural economy and vibrant social structure. I mentioned earlier that last night we had a policy call, and this is something that's really important to us as an organization. Our policy is what we stand for. It's in a lot of ways, I like to say it's kind of like our Bible. It's what we believe in. And it's truly grassroots. It starts from our membership. Last night, Tom was on the call, and he kind of runs the meeting for us. And we had members from all over the state, very diverse group of folks that, are conventional ag producers, folks that work in the food system. We've got urban farmers from cities across the state of Kansas. They all come together, and we work our way through that document. And we make those necessary changes and address the issues that are pertinent to our members. And those can be issues that are local, state, and national as well. And we do this every year leading up to our convention, which will be held next month in Lawrence. But we ratify it, we propose it, discuss it, and ratify it each year at our convention. So it's truly democratic, it's truly grassroots. And this kind of gives you an idea, an image showing it starts on that local level and county level, works its way up to the state or regional level, and then on up to national. And we'll take that policy with us to our national convention in March in Oklahoma City. And then what's in our policy? Well, there's a good number of things in our policy. We talk about the farm safety net or crop insurance. We talk about technology, competition and concentration, antitrust issues, international trade, credit, cooperatives, conservation, energy, taxes, rural development, and of course, quality of life. So we cover a good number of things in both our state and national policy. So tonight we're going to talk about the P's, the 9 P's of the Farm Bill. We're going to talk about the past, some history on the Farm Bill. We're going to talk about the parts of the Farm Bill. We'll talk about some of the players who are involved in the Farm Bill process. We'll talk about the price of the Farm Bill. We will talk about that process, as I mentioned, and also the progress, or lack of progress, I should say. We're going to get into some of the politics of the Farm Bill. I'll talk about some of the priorities that we have as an organization, and then we'll talk about some of the possibilities. So just a little bit of history here, but did you know that there have only been 18 farm bills since 1933? In just over 90 years, we've only had 18 of these farm bills. They come up roughly every 4 to 6 years. You'll notice that some are a little bit closer in the time frame to each other. Some are a little further apart. 38 to 48, of course, is 10 years, but then there was only 1 year between 48 and 49. But for the most part, it's every 4 to 6 years that we pass a new farm bill. So starting in the 30s, 1933, of course, we all know many folks remember their folks talking about this or their grandparents talking about it, but it was the dirty 30s. The Great Depression was in full swing. Consumers were struggling. And of course, the severe drought and dust storms that ravaged the land created an environmental catastrophe known as the Dust Bowl. My great-grandfather farmed in Decatur County, and he didn't grow a crop out there for 7 years. And my grandmother talked a lot about, the dust storms and the grasshoppers and all of the issues that they dealt with during that time. So legislators introduced that first farm bill in 1933 to help farmers with those low prices and those poor growing conditions. The first farm bill also provided financial aid to those farmers, and the federal government paid them to stop the production of those 7 staple crops, or what we call commodities. The idea was that if you decrease supply, crop prices would increase, and that would relieve those farmers of the burden and help them sell their storage of previous harvests. It also helped with conservation by preventing unnecessary tillage and water usage and reducing the strain on an already taxed environment. Moving forward into the 1960s, the Farm Bill changed and it morphed with the ideas and difficulties of the times. Many of you probably remember a lot of those times in the 1960s. But then financial aid for farmers moved towards social awareness and food assistance for low-income families. In 1973, the Farm Bill became omnibus, meaning it was comprised of several different items. So just over 50 years ago now. Not only did it include that support for farmers, it authorized a food stamp program, what we now know today as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. With that important step, the Farm Bill stopped being just about farmers. It truly became the Food and Farm Bill. Moving into the 1980s, the Farm Bill continued to evolve. Environmental disasters such as oil spills and concerns over water and air pollution turned the focus of Americans to protecting Mother Earth. And that led to many of the conservation programs that we know today being added to the Farm Bill. In the 90s, organic farming provisions and research funding became part of the Farm Bill, and the turn of the century saw even further expansion. That included focus on horticulture and specialty crops, or the crops that you and I eat, primarily, and promote local food systems. Then we moved into the 2000s, the new millennium. The rise of technology brought the addition of bioenergy programs. That includes refining corn kernel starch and other renewable sources into fuel. And continued into the 2000s, the Farm Bill continued to provide food assistance to a growing number of people across the country, including families with children, the elderly, and the disabled. And the Farm Bill became a far cry from its starting point generations ago. And truly, that is the good majority of folks who utilize those programs. It's those families that are working, that have children, the elderly, and the disabled. That's the good majority of folks who are using those programs. So from 2008 to 2014, by the time the 08 Farm Bill was enacted, food and nutrition programs comprised approximately 80% of the total budget. In 2014, there were numerous battles over nutrition assistance, and many lawmakers, I don't need to tell you what party they were from, wanted to drastically reduce funding and add requirements to receive those benefits. Those battles led to the initial defeat of the Farm Bill in the House. In the end, compromises were made. Less severe cuts to the program happened. It was reduced by $8 billion, that's billion with a B, instead of the initial desired $40 billion. So 2018 and beyond, we are currently operating, well, no, we're not, because the 2018 Farm Bill expired on us, but we are still technically operating underneath it. Typically, every 4 or 5 years, as I said, Congress drafts another Farm Bill. It does evolve over time, as you can see, as we've talked about. And as Congress reviews those programs and addresses those concerns, they make those changes that are necessary. These large bills, these omnibus bills, are very difficult to pass through Congress, even in the best of times. So you can imagine how difficult it is right now. This bill is no different. It takes great financial resources and compromise. Many provisions are fighting for those dollars. We'll talk a lot more about that as we move along. One of the big questions we get every time the Farm Bill discussion comes up is, why is SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, in the Farm Bill? And I'll talk a little bit about that because there is a Kansas connection. So as you can see here, this picture, Senator George McGovern, who was a Democrat of South Dakota, and our own Senator Bob Dole, Republican of Kansas, came together back in the 70s. They realized we had a glut on the market. There was a lot of there were a lot of crops on the market. Prices were low, but there were a lot of hungry people both here in the U.S. and across the world. And they realized that something needed to be done to address this issue, and they needed to bring food programs into the Farm Bill. And during a press conference, when this was all being brought forward, a reporter asked Senator Dole, why would you put food stamps in the Farm Bill? And in his true Kansas wit, Senator Dole answered, let's see, food and agriculture, do they have something in common with each other? And the late Barry Flinchbaugh, K-State Ag Econ professor, always said, if you take SNAP out of the Farm Bill, that's the last Farm Bill ever. As I said earlier, 80 to 85% of the funding goes to food and nutrition programs. If you remove those programs, it leaves USDA a shell of itself. There would be no need for a USDA on the cabinet level if you take SNAP out of the Farm Bill. Everything else could literally be farmed out to other agencies. And frankly, urban members of Congress don't have any reason to support crop insurance for farmers without a nutrition program for their constituents. But I will note that just as many rural constituents are utilizing these SNAP programs and food and nutrition programs as urban. But you've got to get those urban members of Congress to vote for it because they outnumber us, and I'll show you why. So this picture is it's a fairly outdated map of the House of Representatives districts all across the country. Many of these have changed significantly with reapportionment, but it gives you an idea. You know, we have 435 congressional districts in this country, and really only about 38 are considered rural by government standards. So those would be, of course, those that are these larger districts, you know, some that are full states, our district, the Big First, this one here in Nebraska. Those are the ones that are considered more rural. So, you know, you've got fewer people out there, much wider land mass. And then, you know, these smaller concentrated districts is where all of your people are. That's where all your population is. So our voice is getting smaller every 10 years when we do reapportionment. So in order to get the programs that we need out here in farm country, we've got to have good relationships with those folks from the urban areas of the country. So what could happen if Congress took SNAP out of the Farm Bill? Well, let's just talk about it. Nutrition could go to Health and Human Services. That's been brought up many times over the years, and you know, makes sense on the outset. Energy programs could go to the Department of Energy. There are energy programs in the Farm Bill. They could easily be moved over there. Research and extension is funded through the Farm Bill, so you could move all of that over to the Education Department if we still have an Education Department. And the Forestry Service could go to Interior. Forestry Service funding is currently funded through that Farm Bill, through USDA. So by the time you do all this, it gets USDA down to approximately 15 to 20% of its original budget, which is not enough to demand a cabinet level agency. And just a reminder, those who want this know exactly what they're doing. We'll talk more about this later. So let's get into the parts of the Farm Bill. The 2018 Farm Bill titles are 12 different titles, starting with commodities, then moving into conservation, trade, nutrition, credit, rural development, research, forestry, energy, horticulture, crop insurance, and then number 12 is the miscellaneous title, kind of the catch-all title. I'm going to walk through each individual one and tell you a little bit about them. Title I commodity programs. Title I provides for a major decline in revenue for the major commodity crops such as corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, and peanuts. You know, many of the commodities that we grow here in Kansas. It also provides protection against a fall in milk prices, disaster relief for livestock and tree fruit producers, and import barriers on sugar. Title II is conservation title. These programs, as we talked about earlier, reward responsible environmental stewardship and improve land management techniques. Title III is trade, and not only does it support ag exports with programs like Market Access Program, it also provides for international food assistance with emergency and non-emergency programs. Title IV is nutrition. Again, that's the big one. We've talked about SNAP, but there's also TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program. This helps roughly 43 million Americans at any given time with food access. It also provides funding to help get USDA foods into schools. Title V is the credit program. That helps ensure that loans, both from the government and commercial lenders, can be available to farmers and ranchers. Title VI is rural development. You don't have to be a farmer to live away from cities. The rural development programs include internet and telecommunication access, planning for small communities, and helps support small businesses. Title VII, research, extension, and related matters. I mentioned earlier, the extension programs are funded here. So, you know, you've got our K-State research and extension. We've got the experiment fields across the state as well. That's all brought to you by funding through the Farm Bill. It helps to expand public knowledge about food systems as a whole as well. Title VIII is that forestry title, so forest management. Title IX is energy, biofuels, research, demonstrations, providing energy for farms and small communities. There's also programs that reward farmers for using different feedstock. We even get into solar and wind energy for farms as well. Title X is horticulture. These are our specialty crops, fruits, nuts, vegetables, and flowers. A lot of the fruits, or excuse me, a lot of the foods that you and I eat, those are often overlooked in agriculture, but it provides product promotion, pest and disease prevention, research, and helps to support the Certified Organic Agriculture Program. Title XI is crop insurance. Really, this is the only true farm program that farmers have anymore. It's the only safety net that they have anymore. So this is what protects them in the event of natural disasters, drought, those kinds of things. And then finally, the catch-all title, Title XII, is the miscellaneous title. That provides programs for livestock and poultry producers and others who are not covered in those previous titles. It especially aims to help limited resource and socially disadvantaged farmers as well. So that gives you kind of a rough idea of what the Farm Bill contains, all the different titles. And I love this quote. This was from President Obama in 2014 when he signed that Farm Bill into law. He said, "It's like a Swiss Army knife," and it couldn't be any more correct. As you can see, it's got all the different blades and tools that a Swiss Army knife would have. That's the Farm Bill. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit about some of the policy priorities that we have here at Kansas Farmers Union when it comes to the next Farm Bill. These are some of the things that we have decided to lift up. And I want to preface this with these were set at last year's convention, so we may be changing these priorities here as we talk about our policies moving forward before our next convention in November. But greenhouse atmospheric emissions, protecting funding that supports practices that mitigate and eliminate such emissions, overall Farm Bill baseline funding increase, increasing the definition for beginning farmer and rancher from 10 to 15 years, and match veterans who are returning to farming equally. We want to improve access to and address the inequities in programs geared toward beginning, veteran, socially disadvantaged, and underserved farmers. We, of course, want to maintain a strong nutrition title that supports the food and nutrition security of our communities and that increases opportunities for local and regional procurement. We want to strengthen that research title with a focus on research, outreach, and education to improve on-farm climate mitigation and adaptation. We want to expand and fund the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. That's a program that we fought really hard to first get into the Farm Bill back in 2014, and then to get additional funding for it in 2018. We got 50 million into the Farm Bill in 2018. We're trying to get 65 million in for this next Farm Bill. Addressing ongoing staffing shortages. I'm sure many of you know when you go into the FSA offices in your area or in your county, a lot of times their staff is not full. They're dealing with shortages. There have been a lot of retirements, and then getting that adequate pay back up for field staff is important. We want to require USDA to take department-wide steps to streamline program applications, forms, and processes to make their programs more accessible. We want to streamline access to USDA programs and hiring sufficient staff to service technical and administrative requirements of each program to assure timely, competent, and beneficial participation for family farmers. And we want to strengthen programs that support local and regional food systems. So those are just some of the priorities that we have as a state organization. Of course, National Farmers Union has many priorities as well. Let's talk about now the players in the Farm Bill. So these are the four corners. Up in the upper left-hand corner, we have Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan. She is the current chairwoman of the Senate Agriculture Committee. Right below her is Senator John Bozeman of Arkansas. He's the ranking member of the Senate Ag Committee. Up in the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner, there is Representative Glenn Thompson, or GT Thompson as he goes by. He's from Pennsylvania. He's a Republican. He's chair of the House Ag Committee. And then below him is Representative David Scott of Georgia. He's the ranking member on the House Ag Committee. So these are our leaders when it comes to the next Farm Bill. This is a map that shows you the House Agriculture Committee membership, where they are all from. And as you can see, it's a pretty good distribution of membership all throughout the Midwest and the Great Plains, and then out into the West and the East. We've even got a member from Hawaii. So, it's fairly close to equal. The margins are pretty tight in the House right now. The Republicans do have a small lead, a small majority there. But here in Kansas, we have two members who serve on the House Agriculture Committee. Our Congressman Tracy Mann from the 1st District is on the committee, and then Sharice Davids from the Kansas City area, and then she's got a couple rural counties there to the south. She's fairly new on the committee, just came on within the last 2 years. We work really closely with both of these members of Congress. In fact, we were just out in D.C. Last month for the National Farmers Union fly-in, met with both of them and their staff to talk about our priorities for the Farm Bill. And we stay in fairly close contact with both of them when it comes to the Farm Bill and what's happening around it. Over on the Senate side, it's a very different picture. As you can see, the strength really falls within the Midwest, the Great Plains, and then kind of the Southeast and Northeast. There is a little bit of representation to the West in Colorado and New Mexico, but aside from that, that's really where the strength lies. California is the largest ag producing state in the country, and they don't have a senator serving on the ag committee. I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting that Texas does not have a senator on the ag committee. I used to work in Wisconsin, and they haven't had a senator on the ag committee for quite some time. There are two states that actually have both senators right now. Iowa has both, and Minnesota has both of their senators. And here in Kansas, we have our Senator Marshall, who serves on the Ag Committee. He took over when Pat Roberts retired and took that seat. But we also have Senator Jerry Moran, who serves on the Agricultural Appropriations Committee. That's where all the dollars are to fund all the programs that are part of the Farm Bill and deal with agriculture. So he is, in my opinion, equally important to all of this. It's good to have this representation on the Ag Committee, but it's also good to have somebody who knows where the dollars are and knows where they need to go. So just a little bit of history for all of you. The last time we had this much representation on the House and Senate Agriculture Committees was in 1993. So, currently we have 3 on the Ag Committees, plus we have Jerry Moran on Ag Appropes. But in 93, we had then Representative Pat Roberts, we had then Senator Bob Dole, and then Representative Dan Glickman serving on the respective House and Senate Agriculture Committees. So it's been a long time since we've had this much representation. So we're doing pretty well for the most part when it comes to that. So Farm Bill spending, the price of the Farm Bill. Total spending on the Farm Bill between 2023 and 2032 projected to be $1.3 trillion. And this is a good visual for folks to see just exactly where those dollars are going. As I mentioned earlier, it's usually anywhere from 80 to 85% when it comes to the nutrition program, and then it goes to crop insurance, down to commodity programs. I'm not able to read that number 4. I've got something in the road there. But then everything else is that 1%. So it kind of looks like Pac-Man in a way, that nutrition title. So let's talk a little bit about the process itself. So the Farm Bill, once a new Farm Bill is put into place, really the process starts all over again because it takes so long to get a new one formulated. So this starts with committee hearings. So the individual committees in the Senate and the House start holding hearings, and they start working their way through the Farm Bill, through the individual titles, and they start talking about what's working, what isn't working, what needs tweaked, what needs fixed, what needs thrown out, all of those different things. Then they go to field hearings. That's when members of Congress go back to their district, members of the Senate go back to their states, and they hold these field hearings so that folks that are not able to go to DC and testify can at least come to one of these field hearings and give their thoughts. We've been to a number of these over the years. I got my start with the Farm Bill back in 2011, actually, leading up to what should have been the 2012 Farm Bill, ended up being the 2014 Farm Bill. We did a field hearing down in Wichita with Senator Roberts and Senator Stabenow. But they hold these. It's a really good opportunity for folks to get out there and get their priorities in front of them. You'll notice in this picture on the right, Mr. Walz, our current vice presidential candidate on the Democratic Party. He, of course, was a member of the House Ag Committee for many years, worked on a number of farm bills. There he is with his camo hat on. I don't think that camo hat had Harris Walz on it, though. Not back then, anyway. So this just gives you an idea of the path to a new farm bill. As you can see at the top there on either side, the House Agriculture Committee, the Senate Agriculture Committee, they each draft, amend, and vote on their own version of the bill. And then it moves down to the full House and the full Senate. Each chamber then debates, amends, and votes on the bill from its respective committee. So far, the only committee that has drafted, amended, and voted on its own version of the bill is the House Agriculture Committee. They're the only ones that have done that, and that was back in May, middle of May. So they're the only ones that have done that. The Senate has a framework of a bill pulled together, but they haven't actually drafted, amended, and voted on it. And that's where we are deadlocked. So basically, things have stopped right at this point. But we're going to walk through the whole process anyway. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of some different things we've done around the Farm Bill. Representative Sharice Davids, I mentioned her earlier. She's from the Kansas City area. She held a Farm Bill roundtable at one of our board members' farms in Garnett, Kansas. Rosanna Bauman, she's right here. She runs a farm where she produces chickens and butchers them right there on her farm and sells them. She's got an organic farm, her brother's farm in that area too. So we held a roundtable discussion with a number of other ag groups there at their farm. I've attended a number of roundtables and listening sessions for this farm bill as well. Senator Marshall, of course, from Kansas, and Senator Bozeman from Arkansas, the ranking member, held a roundtable in Manhattan a little over a year ago. And then I was in Gypsum, Kansas, and Tom was there with me that day. We were there. Representative Tracy Mann and G.T. Thompson held a Farm Bill listening session there in Gypsum. Moving through the process, the committee markups. This is a picture of the Senate Agriculture Committee gathered in their committee room, and this is former Senator Pat Roberts here when he was chairman of the last Farm Bill, and current chairwoman Debbie Stabenow to his right. All of these people around the room here, the periphery, these are staffers. These are the folks that actually run the country, and they're the ones that are doing a lot of the behind the scenes work. And of course, all of the senators that serve on the committee are sitting around the table here. So they do the committee markup, and literally they walk through page by page, line by line, and get out their red pens and truly mark it up and make decisions on where things go from there. Moving in through the process, the leaders from the House and the Senate, including committee chairs, form a conference committee to combine the bills. And so that's what this image looks like right here. This is the conference committee on the last Farm Bill. I mentioned Tim Walz earlier. There he is, right there. But yeah, he was part of the conference committee. They all get together in this big room. And as you can see right here, that is the Farm Bill. There's one stack that's the House version and one stack that's the Senate version. And they have to marry the two together through that conference committee. And after that, the full chambers, the floor votes on the combined final bill. So it goes to the floor for debate and votes. Then the final bill is sent to the White House for the president's signature. So there is President Obama signing the 2014 Farm Bill. I think he was in front of a John Deere combine, but he's got, of course, Senator Stabenow, Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, USDA Secretary Vilsack there. That's the signing. So that gets it back into law, and then they start the process all over again. So back in 2012, we were in DC for the NFU fly-in, and we were part of a Farm Bill Now rally. And I felt like a couple weeks ago when we were out there, we should have been having that same rally again since we've been delayed. But instead of a Farm Bill Now, it's become a Farm Bill Later. And basically what's happened, the 2018 Farm Bill expired on September 30th. It expired the same date last year, and it was extended for 1 year. Congress has until the end of this year to pass a new Farm Bill or extend the current Farm Bill. We can continue to extend it basically as long as we want to, but right now, that's the only options they have right now is to either pass a new one or extend the current Farm Bill. If neither is done, though, the bill reverts back to the original 1949 law, and that could actually be kind of a good thing for farmers because then we get parity pricing on the commodities that we produce. The only problem is for those farmers that grow soybeans, they're not included because we weren't growing soybeans in 1949 here in the U.S. So there's a number of things that could happen. When we were out in DC last month, there was talk that as soon as the election's over and we know where things end up, who gets the White House, who gets the House, who gets the Senate, that the appetite for a new farm bill may come back. We don't know. We don't know what will happen, of course, on election day. We don't know who's going to get the White House, House, and Senate. But a lot of what happens with the farm bill does ride on that. Um, so really time will tell. I don't believe that there's time for them to get anything done in the lame duck, meaning after the election and before a new Congress takes over, mainly for the fact that there just isn't a lot of time. Congress is back in session briefly now for the next couple of weeks, and then after the election's over, they'll go back briefly, and then they'll come back for Thanksgiving. They'll go back briefly in December, come back for Christmas, and then a new Congress takes over in early January. So I just don't see that there's enough time to get things done. So here's an old picture. I think Tom Giesel shared this with me many years ago, but this is called Snipe Hunting. It's a political cartoon from a little over 100 years ago in the Kansas Union Farmer newspaper. And the old man says, they told me to stand here and they'd chase in a solution to my problems. And there's the House and Senate off on adjournment. That's kind of how it's felt here lately when it comes to the Farm Bill. So as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So I do want to get into this Project 2025 and talk about what this proposal has in mind for U.S. agriculture. I'm going to really just kind of highlight these areas that I have truly highlighted in blue. Nearly everything in Project 2025's Ag chapter runs counter to the $1.5 trillion farm bill that the GOP-led House Ag Committee passed out of committee in May, which is very interesting. You would have thought that they would have been somewhat similar in what they wanted and what their priorities were, but there's very little that's close. I don't know if any of you have read this Project 2025 or even read this particular chapter, but it's some pretty scary stuff. So also right below there, very little in that chapter meshes with the two separate Senate Ag Committee frameworks for a farm bill. So the Republican side of the Senate Ag Committee and the Democratic side of the Ag Committee both have two different frameworks for their farm bill, and neither one comes close to what Project 2025 wants. So it really stands on its own. So it broadly calls on Congress to limit USDA's role to primarily focus on ag production and defend agriculture from the left by ending, quote, any association with the United Nations and other efforts to push sustainable development schemes connected to food production. It also calls for repealing the sugar program. Sugar does not receive direct subsidies, but domestic prices are higher than international because the sugar program limits imports to protect domestic production. Project 2025 would also like to see the two main commodity programs repealed. So ag risk coverage and price loss coverage, which is our crop insurance, ARC and PLC, they are used by farmers in 22 commodity crops. And they say that any safety net should focus on helping farmers who have been in a disaster or some other unforeseen event. I don't disagree with that at all, especially given what we've seen happening with these hurricanes. But farmers really, the only safety net they have, the only farm program they have right now is crop insurance. And with climate change, with extreme weather events, we are using it more and more. Project 2025 calls on Congress to ban farmers from receiving ARC and PLC payments the same year they also receive crop insurance indemnities. Those are payments made to farmers when their crop yield or revenue decreases. Few things can cause a member of Congress to go off on a USDA secretary in a hearing than any effort to cut FSA offices in their districts. That's something they want to see done as well. The Commodity Credit Corporation, or CCC, Project 2025 wants Congress to revoke USDA's authority to use the Commodity Credit Corporation Fund. And if you'll remember, that was the same pot of money, $33 billion, that gets renewed every year, that Trump and Sonny Perdue used to pay off farmers when they created their market facilitation program. And that all came about because we started a trade war with China. We raised tariffs, and that led China to stop purchasing soybeans from us, and they started purchasing soybeans from South America. So they paid off farmers, they wrote them checks because they took their soybean market away. Project 2025 under crop insurance states that taxpayers should not pay more than 50% of crop insurance premiums. Cutting insurance subsidies to 47% would save an estimated $8.1 billion a year and only reduce insured acres roughly 1%. Under conservation programs, the report calls for eliminating the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP, citing that, quote, farmers should not be paid in such a sweeping way not to farm their land. CRP currently has 24.7 million acres enrolled, and their annual budget is about 1.8 billion. Project 2025 also wants to remove the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, from holding producers to wetlands compliance. Checkoffs. USDA should not approve any new requests for checkoffs or marketing orders. A new administration also should work with Congress to eliminate the 22 current checkoff programs, or at least hold regular votes from producers to continue the programs. Now, that's something I could get behind, and I imagine Tom Giesel could too, because we have this discussion a lot at Farmers Union about checkoffs, because it is a tax on the producer, and it is not voluntary. It is required. Anytime you sell a bushel of wheat or a bushel of corn, anytime you sell cattle, you have to pay that checkoff. Export promotion programs. Project 2025 wants to get rid of the market access program and foreign market development program. Nutrition. They want to call for moving the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and other food aid programs out of USDA and into the Department of Health and Human Services. We've talked about this. I told you what would happen if we do that. It would not be good. Project 2025 calls for tighter work requirements on SNAP and reevaluates the Biden administration regulations on the Thrifty Food Plan, which boosted SNAP benefits 23%. And on repealing dietary guidelines, Project 2025 cites there's no shortage of private sector dietary advice for the public, so the USDA Health and Human Services effort to define healthy eating should go away. So there's that. Now we can move into hopefully some more optimistic news. Just the other day, Vice President Harris and Governor Tim Walz announced their plan for rural communities. It'll strengthen rural healthcare by adding 10,000 healthcare professionals and expanding telemedicine. It'll cut the number of ambulance deserts in half. It'll keep rural hospitals and pharmacies open, support the next generation of small and mid-sized farmers and ranchers, and strengthen the backbone of the rural economy with investments in housing, childcare, and senior care. Now, I'm not going to walk through each individual one of these, but basically, here's what it does. It increases access to affordable and high-quality health care in rural communities by adding 10,000 of those healthcare professionals, expanding telemedicine, and cutting the number of ambulance deserts in half. It supports the sandwich generation, as they call it, to care for elders at home, lowering the cost of child care and increase the number of providers, and expand the child tax credit to provide tax cuts up to $6,000 for families with newborns. It lowers the cost of buying a home, starting and expanding a business, raising a family, by sparking the construction of 3 million new housing units, providing up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for first-time home buyers, and increasing the small business tax deduction for startup expenses tenfold to $50,000. It also invests in the future of American ag by boosting access to credit, land, and markets, building new markets and streams of income for small and mid-sized farmers and producers, and supporting the rise of the next generation of American farmers and ranchers. So this is all fairly new. I just got my hands on this today. They finally got it in this form to share out. So If folks would like this, I can send it to you. You can look at it for yourself and look things over with the time that you have. But I'll be honest, I haven't been able to dig into it deeply just because I got it today, and there's a lot there to dig into. So that's all I have when it comes to the Farm Bill and where things are and where I kind of see things going. Are there any questions, any thoughts, any concerns? I'm sure there's lots of concerns.
This is Jonathan from Northeast Kansas. Nick, thank you for your presentation. I have 3 questions, but I don't want to monopolize the Q&A part. So I'm going to,
I think you're okay.
if it's okay, I'll ask
Go
the
ahead.
first one. Go ahead. Okay. The first one, and these are, well, how important is trade with Mexico and Canada to Kansas farmers? That's the first question.
Yeah. Very important. And I'll tell you why, because right now there are 500 train cars sitting at the Mexico border right now that are not allowed in because of some of the trade issues that basically Trump started back when he was in office. There's product on those trains right now sitting at the Mexican border that cannot get in because of the challenges that we are dealing with, the messes that we are still cleaning up from Trump. So, we're operating under the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement, the new NAFTA 2.0. But now Trump wants to violate a lot of what NAFTA or this USMCA stands for. He mentioned the other day the 200% tariffs on John Deere because John Deere's wanting to move production to Mexico. Well, if they're doing that for a reason. Obviously, it's because of cheap labor. So they're doing that. But you're also looking at right now the issue of farm income is now at an all-time low. Farmers are not buying green equipment. They're not even buying red equipment or blue equipment because their income is down. And if you put a 200% tariff on a tractor that's built in Mexico, the farmer's really not going to be able to afford it. So that is a real issue. Canada, on the other hand, does a much better job of taking care of their dairy farmers than we do here in the U.S. Because they have what we call supply management. They control the supply of their dairy. They know when the peaks are going to be, when demand is high. They know when demand is going to be low, and they calculate that accordingly. That's something that we haven't done in the U.S., and it's been to the detriment of the family dairy farmer. I worked in Wisconsin for many years and saw firsthand the loss of dairy farmers across that state. You look in Kansas now, where are the big dairies going? Well, they're going in southwest Kansas because there's lots of space to build, and obviously they think there's lots of water underneath them that they can pump. I disagree wholeheartedly with that. I think that's wrong. I know Tom sends me pictures all the time of the big dairy that's going in out his direction, and I keep hearing about more and more that want to, move from California basically, and build in Southwest Kansas. So it is important. Trade with our neighbors is extremely important.
Okay, Nick, just so I understand, the 500 train cars, that is U.S. farmers' produce headed south, or is it Mexican produce headed north?
It is U.S. commodities headed south.
Okay.
That are being held up. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Jonathan, just a second. Tom,
I just want to throw in one little thing so people remember the last year, or the culmination kind of the Trump ag thing in Pawnee County, Kansas, with the tariffs that we had with Trump and that policy. The cash price of grains in Pawnee County on April 5th of 2020, soybeans were $7.71 a bushel, wheat was $4.30, grain sorghum $3.10, and corn $3.50. And that's what you're going to get more of.
Yeah.
And that's why they had to take all that CCC money and throw it out at farmers. The trouble was that they didn't, there was no payment limitation on it, or no limitations, and some fat cats got really fat.
Yeah, they did.
I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Tom, for those numbers. That's very helpful. Second question is related to the first one, and that is, how important is continued access to immigrant labor to Kansas agriculture?
Again, it's extremely important. The good majority of those cows that I talked about, those dairy cows, are milked by immigrant labor. I live, as I mentioned earlier, in north central Kansas, and we've got a truck farm here called the Depot Market, and they grow produce all summer and spring. And it's right on the river bottom here at Scandia, Kansas. Right now, they're going through pumpkin harvest, and the majority of their workers are from Mexico and South America. And they are the ones that are doing the work. When I was up in Wisconsin, the dairies up there are primarily using immigrant labor. They're part of their community. I mean, these are people that are coming in and they are bringing their families, and they are contributing to the economy. They are paying taxes. They are paying into Social Security that they're never going to get. Many of them are not even able to get driver's licenses, and those kinds of things. So yes, it's extremely important. And if you want to see food prices go up, just go ahead and start deporting immigrants that provide the good majority of the ag labor in this country, because that's what it'll do. And food will rot in the fields. Cattle will go unmilked, and cows have to be milked at least twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. So this is huge. And, you hear the other side pointing at Vice President Harris, hopefully soon to be President Harris, and saying, she dropped the ball on immigration and she dropped the ball on the border and all that. I'm sorry, folks, but, they should have taken civics classes. The Vice President does not control immigration. She does not control the border. It's Congress's job to come together with a comprehensive immigration reform plan. They've done this before. The last time they did it, Ronald Reagan was president. They've come close to doing it other times. But as we all know, Trump told them, nope, you're not going to do that. I don't want the Democrats to have this win. Well, guess what? I don't think they want to solve it. I don't think Republicans want to solve this problem, because then what are they going to run on? I think that's what it boils down to at the end of the day. But it's a serious, serious issue. And, I didn't even get into the packing plants that are in Southwest Kansas. That's another issue in itself. Those folks are the ones that are cutting up all the beef and shipping it out. It's not you and I. We're not doing that work. So yeah, it's extremely important, and we've got to do something about it.
Can the Kansas legislature do to support Kansas producers without harming the small communities, the cities that they and residents rely on for services like fuel, groceries, schools, and that second job, which can be critical to farm finances?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the big thing at the end of the day, and I don't know whether the Kansas legislature can do this or not, but farmers need fair prices for what they grow. Farmers need to make the money back that it takes to produce what they grow. And right now they're not doing that. It's costing more to grow a bushel of wheat than they're actually making. It's costing them more to grow a bushel of corn than what they're making. So we've got to address that issue. And I'll tell you, a big thing that could be done and should be done is we have to address concentration in the marketplace. We have to address antitrust issues in agriculture. And this is, again, something that hasn't been done for 40 some years. When Ronald Reagan became president, he started gutting the Department of Justice, primarily the antitrust division. And that's when we started seeing things go downhill fast. And, all you got to do is look and see, when we look at our food system, who controls the packing plants. Well, it's Cargill, it's National Beef, it's Tyson, it's Smithfield, it's all of those. But there's just a handful. There's not, a great array of packing plants like there used to be. The same thing goes for seed and fertilizer. We're down to just a handful of seed and fertilizer chemical companies that farmers have access to. And the price is set. They don't have options anymore. They don't get to shop around. The same thing goes for equipment. Earlier I showed that picture of the Farm Bill roundtable that we had, or the listening session that we had with Tracy Mann and G.T. Thompson in Gypsum, Kansas. They had every color of combine there that day, didn't they, Tom? There was a red one, there was a gray one, there was a green one, there was a yellow one. And oh, they were so proud of that. And I made the comment in my remarks, here we are, we're surrounded by probably $1 million worth of Pioneer seed because, the guy's farm we were on sold Pioneer seed. Well, that's one of the few seed companies now. And then here's the lineup of the 4 equipment manufacturers. Farmers need options, and they need to be able to be competitive, and they need better prices for their products. It would be wonderful if folks didn't have to go to town and have another job. But guess what? I grew up in a family that my mom had to teach because we had to have health insurance. And we didn't have that without her going to town and teaching. And my dad could farm and do that. But a lot of times mom was the breadwinner. She was the one that was bringing home the bacon. And that was not always easy. And I know that was tough on my dad, especially during those late 80s and early 90s. But I think if we can address some of those issues that I mentioned, and a lot of that has to be done on the federal level. Sure, the state can do some things, but I think a lot of it has to be done on the federal level.
We're a little past 8 o'clock, but I have a question. What do you think about agricultural manufacturing in rural western Kansas? Do you have some ideas on that? We used to be doing a lot, but I don't know now.
Yeah. So up in this area, not too far west of me, is now Applequist Manufacturing. And that would be Roy Applequist that used to have Great Plains Land Pride Manufacturing down in Salina. He sold that to Kubota here a number of years ago. And then he turned around, and I'm guessing he used those dollars that he got from that sale, and he took the old Excel camper production facility in Smith Center and is now manufacturing. I think he's doing I think there's some tillage equipment maybe, and then maybe like a stripper header or something like that for combines. I'm not positive what exactly they're doing out there, but so there's some things happening that direction. I know that down at Beloit, for instance, there's sunflower manufacturing and that. But unfortunately, the way things have been for so long, it's cheaper to outsource a lot of that production, send it elsewhere. We also have Landall over in Marysville. They're growing. It sounds like they may be growing even more here in the future, but I don't disagree with you, Connie. It'd be good to see more of that manufacturing happening all across the state, especially in Southwest Kansas. But that's a conversation that I haven't had, and obviously we need to be talking with folks in the Department of Commerce and other parts of the state to see if that's a possibility.
Nick, I got a question about farm consolidation.
Yeah.
When I grew up, there's farmers everywhere, but then when my kids were in high school, they were about the only children in Logan County that went to Oakley that are actually from an operating farm. There was no other children no other farms like that. Now the farms are getting up to, 10,000 minimum, 50,000 acres. It seems like pretty soon one farmer is going to own the state of Kansas, and they're going to be looking at Nebraska. So I wonder if you had some comments on farm consolidation and specifically the impact of, like Tom brought up about no payment limitations on some of these things, especially crop insurance.
Right, right. That's the thing, and it's happening everywhere. It's same thing happening here in Republic County, where we've got really two big farmers in the county that are farming. One's farming one half, and the other's farming the other half, and the rest of us are all just scratching. I would say something else, but there's ladies here. I'm not going to say it. So, but yeah, it is an issue. And I'll tell you, Tom and I both were interviewed for a High Plains Public Radio article here recently where we talked a lot about this. And really, we've become so much of an extractive society. We are extracting wealth from our rural communities. We are extracting resources from our communities, and those, a lot of times we think and I'm basically saying this word for word from Tom. We are exporting our resources, not our commodities. We are exporting our resources, like water, for instance. So the Ogallala, the fact that we're drying that up at a rate that is just unbelievable, and yet we're still putting big dairies right on top of it. And all of those things. It is very concerning that the big keep getting bigger and the little keep getting pushed out. And believe me, it's sad when I see a farmer die and then the vultures start flying in. Even before they're gone, they're getting it locked in as to who's going to farm it and how and when and all that. We had one farmer here who was literally lying on his deathbed and was still buying land within about 18 hours of his death, just because it was one more piece of ground that he could get that was for sale that was bordering some of his own. So nothing slows him down. So we've got to get away from this mentality of, the big have to get bigger, the small have to get out, because pretty soon our rural communities are going to start dying, and they are dying because of it. We're losing so many of the things that make a community. You start losing your school. You start losing all of those services that are part of a community, whether it's your bank or your post office or other businesses that support it. I can just go up the road here to Republic, Kansas, and show you one perfect example of a town that has lost basically all of those things. And we're probably going to lose our grain elevator here in the next year. There's one more hit. It's tough, and I wish that there was an easy answer to this. But I think with some of these policies that, especially that Biden has brought forward, addressing, antitrust issues, corporate control, concentration, those kinds of things. And now with this Harris and Walz plan for rural America, I think there's a lot of hope. It's just a matter of whether we can get that ball moving and if we have a friendly Congress that's going to help us to make these things happen. So